So hi there and welcome to episode 7 of the OGV Media Group Let's Talk Transition series of podcasts. I'm Moray Melhuish, founder at Annet Consulting. We help organisations bring offshore technologies and services to market and provide interim project management to the offshore renewables industry. I'm delighted to have with me today Molly Iliffe, Director, Hydrogen Ventures at Environmental Resource Management. Hey Molly, thanks for joining us.
Hi, Murray. Great to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Great. Molly, can you introduce yourself and ERM, please?
Yeah. So ERM is the world's largest sustainability consultancy. It's present in more than 40 countries and has more than 5,500 people with expertise across the hydrogen value chain. And it recently acquired Element Energy and E4Tech, who you might be aware of, expert consultancies in the hydrogen world to help to supplement that expertise. And my name is Molly, so I work in ERM's Edinburgh office and also all over the place in this new remote world. And my focus is really on the commercial development plan for the ERM Dolphin project, which is a floating offshore wind to hydrogen project, and also on the commercial side of hydrogen consultancy projects.
Great. So, Molly, why does hydrogen matter?
Yeah, so hydrogen is fantastically exciting. It's really essential if we're to meet our net zero hydrogen goals and aspirations. And that's because hydrogen is the only decarbonisation vector for some applications in the economy. So as we look for solutions to decarbonise some transport applications, for example, perhaps some shipping and trains, as we look to decarbonise industrial feedstocks and also high temperature industrial processes, hydrogen will be really essential. And it can also bring together different sectors of the economy. So it could perform a really important role in terms of the balancing of the energy system and in transferring energy from regions of the world where it's really cheap to produce hydrogen to regions of the world where there'll be large scale demand developing, for example, in Europe. So we could see the whole energy system, the global energy system and the energy flows around the world shifting as the hydrogen economy scales up and this commodity becomes globally traded.
Great. It's quite an opportunity then. Tell us, so you mentioned that Dolphin is a floating offshore wind hydrogen production project. Can you give us some more information about it?
Yeah, so ERM is developing the Dolphin project. It's a floating offshore wind to hydrogen solution. We're developing an initial 10 megawatt commercial demonstrator project, which we expect to be operational off the coast of Aberdeen in 2025. We're currently going through FEED for that project, and that's been really generously supported by the UK government as well as the Scottish government and other organisations. Looking forward, we're then looking to develop commercial scale projects, and we're at a significant stage of development in those projects, particularly in the Celtic Sea and around Scotland, but also looking to develop a global pipeline as well. The Dolphin concept is really interesting because hydrogen is produced on a floating platform offshore at each wind turbine location. So the concept comprises a floating platform based on the Windflow Atlantic design, on which you have an electrolyzer, desalination equipment, and a wind turbine. And you use the power from the wind turbine to desalinate seawater and produce hydrogen on the platform, which is then piped back to shore. And that means that you don't need a grid connection for the project. So it's really suitable as we use up our nearshore sites and we move further and further from shore into deeper water, and we need a solution to be able to access that fantastic wind resource that's further away, where it would be very expensive to bring that energy ashore in the form of electricity. So in those types of cases, a solution like Dolphin will be really optimal, and it presents an enormous economic opportunity for the UK.
Okay, can you just go into some more detail, please, about why produce the hydrogen offshore and not offshore? Why can that be more cost effective?
Yeah. Yeah, so it's very site specific. If you're looking at a site which is relatively close to the shore, so maybe less than about 80 kilometers, then probably producing your hydrogen onshore will be optimal. But there are likely to be considerations around you need to get planning permission for an onshore hydrogen production facility. They have a very large footprint, and you're putting potentially hydrogen storage onshore and hydrogen production equipment onshore. Um, so if you move your hydrogen production offshore, you get around that potential constraint. But also, as you move further offshore, so maybe it's site specific, but maybe above about 100 or 80 to 100 kilometers from shore, that's when it becomes really optimal to generate your energy in the form of hydrogen than in the form of electricity, because you don't need to install really expensive HVDC infrastructure to bring your energy back to the shore. Over those types of distances, HVDC infrastructure can be about 3 times as expensive as a pipeline. And that's if you're building the pipeline new. If you're repurposing the pipeline, it can be even cheaper. So as we move, as we use up our nearshore sites, as we move to sites further and further from shore, concepts like Dolphin will be commercially optimal. And that's why it presents such a fantastic opportunity as we think about how can we generate hydrogen at scale to use to help with our own decarbonisation objectives, but also to help to achieve some of the aspirations that the UK and Scottish governments have around hydrogen as a commodity for export.
And you mentioned piping the hydrogen to shore for consumption. Can you foresee a time when we have an ecosystem of hydrogen consuming vessels and subsea vehicles offshore, things like the Cellulose Solus AUV with, refueling at projects like Dolphin?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're talking to a wide range of potential off-takers who are really interested in the hydrogen that we can produce. Early stage off-takers are likely to be those which are a little less price sensitive and kind of early movers in this market. So, for example, in the transport space, the Aberdeen region already has hydrogen buses and municipal vehicles, hydrogen refueling stations. It's already got that nascent economy that it's looking to scale up. So that offers a fantastic opportunity for projects like Dolphin to link into, and reduces the offtake risk associated with the project because we've got a number of credible options for offtake. Looking forward, as we move to larger scale projects, though, in the future, other markets will become increasingly more important. So that could be hydrogen for shipping, perhaps in the form of ammonia or methanol, or even liquid hydrogen. I think there are a number of different solutions being considered there. It could also be hydrogen as a fuel for the O&M associated with the project, because reducing the life cycle carbon emissions associated with the hydrogen will be really important. So absolutely, I think that's definitely a longer term market that could be really interesting for this type of concept.
Great. And what sort of value are we looking at for the project, Molly, in terms of investment, number of jobs, production volumes, that sort of thing?
Yeah, so in terms of number of jobs, the 10 megawatt commercial demonstrator will generate about 400 jobs, over 400 jobs in the Aberdeen region while it's being constructed. And then as we move to much larger projects, we could see more than 10,000 jobs generated by the end of this decade. The hydrogen produced is around 800 tons a year for a 10 megawatt project, but we're looking to move to larger scale turbines and introduce efficiencies where possible. It's all about ensuring you produce the maximum amount of hydrogen for the minimum cost so that the cost per unit of hydrogen is as low as possible.
Great. And how about the spend? Can you give us a feel for how much a project like this is worth?
Well, how much it's worth, I mean, that's a big question because there's strategic value, there's economic value, etc. How much it costs. So the particular costs associated with the project are commercially sensitive, although They will be going into the public domain because we've recently made another an application for funding to BEIS for the next phase of the project. But I think it's worth saying that for the commercial scale demonstrator project, it's a little bit more expensive than we would expect for as we move to scale and have multi-turbine projects. This is a single turbine. Everything's being developed bespoke for this particular project, rather than being part of serialized manufacture on a much larger scale project where we can achieve economies of scale. So it's obviously going to be a little bit more expensive. So it's the sort of, between about 50 and 80 million pounds for the commercial demonstrator project. But you need to, take that with the understanding that this is a demonstrator, and we'll be, taking learnings from that to build out the larger projects, which is where the large scale hydrogen and the savings from economies of scale will really come.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, if we can prove this technology, then it would seem that the opportunity is immense. It's fantastic. And you mentioned 2025 for Dolphin being operational off Aberdeen. I mean, that's not actually very far away, which is fantastic. Still in the FEED project. Are you able to share any of your supply chain with us? Where do you foresee this being fabricated, built, launched from, supported from?
Yeah, so we're working really hard with our partners on the project. So we've brought in a number of OEMs. They've been involved for literally for years on the project in order to help us to develop the concept and ensure that we have local content as far as possible, and life cycle carbon emissions as low as possible. So at the moment, the partners on the project are Tractable LNG, and they will continue when we move through to an EPCM structure. When we reach the final investment decision towards the end of next year, they will continue in that leadership role. We also have Principal Power, who are providing the substructure. So they're part of the team developing the project at the moment, and they'll continue in that role as the OEM there. Doosan, Babcock, and also NEL are providing the electrolyzer and the electrical equipment. And ODE, Offshore Design Engineering, is doing the design of the topside associated with the project. So we have a number of OEMs already involved in the project, and that's expected to continue. But there's enormous opportunity for local suppliers as well. So aspects like the onshore reception facility and the pipeline and the mooring and anchoring, there's enormous opportunity there for other suppliers, and they haven't been allocated yet. We've got a register of about 300 different suppliers, and if anyone is listening to this and is really interested in being part of the supply chain, then please reach out either through the Dolphin website, or to me. I can pass you on to the supply chain work package directly, and we would love to engage with you and understand how you can help the project. We're really, we're working with local organizations as well to help to develop the skills that will be needed for the operation and construction of the project, and really ensure that we can maximize the local content as far as possible.
Brilliant. Great to hear you talking about the supply chain, Molly. Can you just remind us, what is that website?
Okay, Ron, I've got the website here. So it's ERM. So it's ERM Dolphin, which is DOLPHYN.ERM.com, which is the Dolphin website, and you'll find a link on there. So you'll find updates on the project, and it's a good way of keeping up to date with the project. And you'll also find a link on there that you can reach out if you're interested in being part of the supply chain, and then included in the sort of workshops we run to keep the supply chain up to date, and included on the supplier register.
Brilliant. There must be a real buzz just now with everything coming together in such a short timescale. You mentioned some future projects, Molly, potentially the Celtic Sea. what sort of timescale are you looking at for that? And compared with the 10 megawatt Dolphin project, how will they compare?
Yeah, so the 10 megawatt project is a demonstrator. We're hoping to build learnings from that then into our larger scale commercial projects. So those projects will be initially of the hundreds of megawatts scale, then building out in later phases into gigawatt scale. So we have a site that we've identified, and we're engaging with the Welsh Government and off-takers on in the Celtic Sea, with the potential to supply hydrogen into the Milford Haven area. So there's enormous opportunities for industry there, also for hydrogen to decarbonise transport, because it's a bit of a transport hub, and potentially as a balancing vector as well for the energy system. And then we're also working with the Scottish Government to develop opportunities around Scotland for projects in hundreds of megawatts scale as well. And we've been undertaking feasibility work with the Scottish Government, and the next phase of that is due to kick off shortly. So a really interesting development pipeline around the UK. We're also looking globally as well for opportunities in deeper water close to potential demand centres. So, for example, Japan is a really interesting opportunity for a concept like this. We're really keen to engage with any potential partners, so large-scale developers with offshore development experience, who are interested in working together, partnering together on the development of commercial scale projects. Every commercial scale project that we do will bring in partners in order to enable us to complete that project. So if anyone is listening to this and is really interested in exploring with us the potential to develop a commercial scale project, please reach out. We'd love to chat.
Yeah, that's great. And hopefully you get a great response to that. Just let's look back for a second. So 2025 is going to be the first offshore hydrogen, which is wonderful. How long has it taken to reach this point, Molly?
Yeah, so we've been developing the project for about 4 years. We received some really excellent funding from BEIS through their hydrogen supply competition to help us to develop the concept for the project and to go through pre-feasibility. Then we received some more funding, which is taking us through FEED to the final investment decision, and which we hope to take place last year. So it's been a number of years to get here. Yeah.
Great. And what are the major hurdles that you've had to overcome so far?
Yeah, so hydrogen is a highly innovative, well, hydrogen itself isn't innovative, but what we're doing is we're putting modules together, which by themselves are proven, but we're putting them together in an innovative way, in a context, an offshore dynamic context, which is quite challenging and which hasn't been done before for this type of project. So there are a number of hurdles around developing the design for the project so that it's optimal. You need to balance it over engineering and over instrumentation with then achieving efficiencies and a cost of hydrogen at the other end that's reasonable. The development of the supply chain is another hurdle that we've had to overcome, because although I think there's a lot of work being done now, certainly the hydrogen market now is unrecognisable to what it was 4 years ago. So we've had to really help to, that's why it's been really important to bring OEMs into the project and to really develop it in partnership with them. The development of the regulatory and planning regime as well has been a really important aspect that we've had to work hard at, because although there's a lot of positivity and acknowledgement that a framework needs to be developed for hydrogen, it's not something that was there when we were starting to develop the project, so that introduced some uncertainty. And the other element is the offtake opportunities for hydrogen. which is a risk common across all hydrogen projects, that they need really credible anchor off-takers that are prepared to be early movers in order to make the project, in order to mitigate risk and make the project suitable for investment.
Great. And in terms of those hurdles and how you overcame them, is there anything you would do differently next time, Molly?
I think probably the only thing we would do differently is, I think it's very easy when you're at the beginning of a project to think, wow, this is super exciting, but to slightly underestimate how much effort it's actually going to take. And resourcing in the hydrogen space is quite a big challenge at the moment. So I think perhaps earlier bolstering up of the team, and that would have really enabled us to move really quickly on the project, rather than to having to build up the team a little bit later when we were already really quite busy. So that's probably something that we could have done. We could have been a bit more quick-footed on. Yeah.
So access to the right people, basically. And
Yeah.
would those be technical people, commercial people, scientists, engineers? What sort of people are you thinking about?
Everything. So ERM at the moment, it's got about 800 roles being advertised on its website. Across the energy transition space and hydrogen space, there's enormous opportunity, and the same skill set is needed, all over the shop. So I would encourage anyone, if they've been inspired by this podcast and is really keen to work on Dolphin, please take a look at the roles on the website, or reach out directly for an informal chat, and we'd really be delighted to speak to you, because we're building up our team really across the board. We're recruiting across the board.
Great. And of the 800 roles, Molly, how many are within the Dolphin team, roughly, would you say?
Oh gosh, I'm not sure how many are in the Dolphin team, because people they don't just work on Dolphin, they work on a number of different things. We do work as well, not just on Dolphin, but also for other developers who are looking to develop hydrogen production projects, and they're really keen to leverage some of the expertise that we've developed in the Dolphin space. And we also do work on kind of midstream hydrogen projects, hydrogen use projects. So if you come in as a engineer, or if you come in as a financial modeler or a consenting expert, or whatever it is that your expertise is, it's likely that you'll be working in a number of different projects in the hydrogen space, of which the development of Dolphin is one of them. But we'll shortly be setting up a whole co-company, which staff will then be seconded into from ERM to help to provide specific expertise for the development of the Dolphin development pipeline and the commercial demonstrator. So there'll be opportunities there for people to move across if it's something that they're particularly interested in.
Right, that's quite exciting. And, Molly, it seems to be that hydrogen's got a really important role to play, in decarbonisation, but also in energy security, of course, which is super important, especially this year. And you've mentioned support from BEIS and from the Scottish Government. Do you think there's more support should be provided to encourage the development of green hydrogen? And if so, what would it look like?
Yeah, so at the moment there is a commercial gap between how much it costs to produce green hydrogen and how much off-takers are expecting to pay based on their experience of the fossil fuel that you're replacing with the hydrogen. So that commercial gap, for these early stage projects, it's appropriate that that's met through government funding, and the UK government and the Scottish government have been quite proactive in developing mechanisms to do that. So, for example, for the early stage Dolphin project, and also other hydrogen projects in the UK, we've been able to access CapEx support and DevEx support through the hydrogen supply competition, for example, and the Net Zero Hydrogen Fund. Looking forward, there's going to be revenue support made available as well for hydrogen production projects. But I think it's fair to say that other countries in Europe are also providing sometimes slightly more generous support for their hydrogen production projects. So the UK is going to need to move quickly if it wants to capitalise on its early mover advantage, which it developed in the early years of the hydrogen space, given its existing expertise in the oil and gas sector, for example, and its embedded expertise from having the gas network that we have, and also the offshore wind industry. So there's certainly a role for government support in order to help to accelerate, well, to ensure that early stage projects are investable and bankable. And from then, though, we would expect that the costs associated with green hydrogen production will drop quickly as OEMs are able to capture economies of scale associated with larger scale manufacture of items and serialized manufacturing. And also we're able to achieve economies of scale from larger projects.
Great. And Molly, earlier you mentioned opportunities for potential employees. You mentioned opportunities for the supply chain. But touching on investment and support, are there opportunities if people want to get involved and invest in Dolphin, or is it fully invested already?
Yeah, absolutely. So we should have some really exciting news coming out shortly around securing an investor for the 10 megawatt commercial demonstrator. And that will also include significant development budget for the larger commercial scale projects, enabling us to bring those to develop those projects. So that'll be fantastic and a really exciting development. What I would say, though, is if anyone's listening to this who is a developer and is really interested in developing Dolphin projects, if you think that the concept might be suitable for sites which you're aware of, we'd be delighted to chat to you, because other commercial scale projects, particularly globally, and not the two that I've already mentioned, we'll need partners to help us to develop those. And so we would love to speak to any developer who's keen to work with us. They'll be coming in at a stage when the development of the project will already have been largely funded by the UK government and our existing investor and ERM. So it's a really interesting prospect for developers coming in at that stage.
So a major announcement coming up soon. That's intriguing. Can you share what type of investor they are? Is it a finance house? Is it one of the big offshore wind companies? One of the big former oil and gas producers? Or can you give us a hint?
So I'm not allowed to give you a hint, Moray. I'm really sorry, but I've got my lines that I'm allowed to say, and that's not one of them. But it is a partner that really sees the global potential for Dolphin, and is supporting not just the development of the 10 megawatt commercial demonstrator, but also of the larger scale commercial projects. So that's really fantastic for the for the concept. It will enable us to move forward with our larger pipeline really quickly. So watch this space, hopefully really shortly. Yeah.
Watch this space, and I won't push at that point for another couple of minutes at least. Great. Molly, I'd like to find out a little bit more about you. How did you come to be Director of Hydrogen Ventures at ERM?
So I'm a director in Hydrogen Ventures rather than of Hydrogen Ventures. Sorry. But yeah, no worries. So I started off in the renewable space because when I left uni, it seemed to me that renewables was the way we were going to save the world. We had to reform our energy sector. Renewables was the way to do that. So I left, I joined a renewables consultancy, and I worked on some of the very first offshore wind farms in the UK and Germany. It was really exciting, while I was there was a massive transformation of the energy sector. But then after about 10 years, it seemed to me that energy is just a tiny piece of the puzzle. We have to decarbonize every part of our economy, and hydrogen allows us to decarbonize some areas that we have no other way of doing. So industrial feedstocks, large scale industrial processes, and some transport applications. And it also enables us to decarbonize more effectively. So, for example, it can help us to balance the energy system more effectively than we can do at the moment, and move energy around the world. So it could change the global geopolitics associated with energy in a very fundamental way, because the energy producing nations will be different from the nations of today as we move to green hydrogen from fossil fuels. So that made me, I caught the hydrogen bug. Absolutely passionate about hydrogen, and then I've been really lucky to be able to work on some of these fantastic cutting edge projects like Dolphin, yeah, so that's how I came to it, Murray.
Great. And Molly, what did you study at university?
So I studied economics and politics.
Okay,
yeah.
Great. And in ERM today, do you see study areas for young people that are particularly of interest to ERM? Are there certain backgrounds that are particularly of interest, or are you just interested across the board?
So I think it depends on what area you want to get into. We do, in the hydrogen space, we have chemical engineers, mechanical engineers, but we also have people who have done something else, but then they've done a master's because they realized that they were super interested in something associated with energy transition or climate change. So they've looked to kind of pivot into that space. And then you have people like me who have a more economics bent, and we're looking at the sort of commercial side of projects. So it's a sort of a broad spectrum, I'd say. I think if you want to get into consultancy, the most important thing to have is the right attitude. Consultancy, you need to be prepared to work really hard and learn really fast, and be prepared that information will be coming at you from every direction. But the upside of that is that you get to work on lots and lots of really super interesting projects across the whole of this space. And for someone at a relatively early stage of their career, I think that that's a really valuable thing. You can learn a lot really fast. I mean, in my first week of consultancy, I learned the same as I'd learned in a whole year in the industry. So it's a baptism of fire, but I think it's really valuable for people if they're sort of starting out in a sector and they want to learn a lot really, really fast.
Wow. So yeah, potentially a great entry point for young people and graduates coming into the industry.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Really. And let's think about Dolphin again for a second. How is success defined for Dolphin?
How is success defined for Dolphin? So I think if in 3 years' time I can be on a boat driving past a dolphin that's floating there in the water with its turbine going, and then a little dolphin jumps out of the water, that'll be success for me. The Dolphin project successfully implemented, and then looking forward maybe to the end of this decade to see a much larger project in the Celtic Sea, for example, and maybe a whole pod of dolphins jumping past. I think that would be fantastic.
It's a great vision. And how do you define success for yourself personally, Molly?
So I think I'm somebody, I really like working on really interesting cutting edge things, and I feel really lucky that in my career I've had 2 chances to do that, because I've had the chance to work in the renewable space just as that was kicking off, and then I've had the chance to work in the hydrogen space just as that was kicking off. And it'll be really interesting to see how this space develops over time, because I'm sure it will be unrecognizable in 5 years and in 10 years from where it is now. But I feel like I sort of live the dream because I get to do a really interesting job with really nice people that I'm really passionate about, and that also makes a positive contribution. Um, so I can't really think of anything that would be more. Yeah, I feel like I'm living the dream a bit, Murray.
Wow, I'm glad. I'm delighted to hear. You know, somebody said recently on one of the podcasts that their father had told them that if they could find a job that they 40% like, then that's great. They should stick at it. But it sounds like you're much higher than that.
Yeah, I go for 1,000%, but 40, man, that's a low bar. Yeah.
Great. Well, look, that brings us to the end of our chat today, Molly. But thank you so much for joining us and for telling us about, you know, the incredible potential with hydrogen, the potential with Dolphin, and your project. That's been absolutely brilliant. Even though you didn't quite tell us who the investor is, we'll look forward to that.
Watch this space. Thanks for having me, Murray. Yeah.
Great, no problem. Great. So, as always, everyone, feedback on today's podcast would be really appreciated. I'm looking for questions that you would like asked of our industry's leaders and pioneers. I'm looking for potential interviewees. Who should we be speaking with? So, feel free to get in touch. A lot of you get in touch through LinkedIn. Some of you directly by email. It's Moray. That's Moray at Annet, Annet, consulting.com. Thank you very much.